Because we've started a little bit later, I'm actually going to go straight into our first presenter without having to do a big introduction so that we can allow for more time for some interactive panel discussion as well as some questions as well. So our first presenter today is Henk Mulder. He is the head of digital cargo for IATA. And his role there is leading the development of data sharing standards named One Record. So over to you, Henk, and hopefully the PowerPoints are loaded up. Great.
Okay. Well, that's happening. Good morning. Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak here today and to be part of this panel. Today I'd like to talk about IoT, the Internet of Things, in particular on something that we call interactive cargo. But I want to put that in context with the sort of non-interactive cargo side, which is what we call One Record, which is more of a global way of sharing data. And my argument will be that we need both. Now, firstly, I have a question for you. What do you want? What is it that you're looking for when you are using technology? What is the objective? What are we actually doing? Think about that for a little bit. And later in the presentation, I'll come back to that and perhaps look at some answers as well. But the answer is not going to be that we need IoT or that we need blockchain or AI or anything like that. I don't think that is what we're trying to do, even though we're all IT people and love technology. We certainly do. So coming back to cargo, myself, I'm involved in air transport, in the International Air Transport Association. We set standards for anything related to air transport, including cargo and passenger transport. When it comes to freight, one of the things that we wonder is, what would freight be like in a perfect world? We think it would be smart, something you can deal with, interact with, something that's independent. So if you find a box lying around somewhere, you can find out what it is and who it belongs to and where it's going and things like that. And it should be connected as well. So these are some of the ideas on the outset. Now, there's two sides to this equation here from our perspective. There's what we call the interactive cargo side, which is the IoT, this is tracking devices on boxes or on containers. But it's also IOL, and we heard about that this morning from Frank, the Internet Logistics. And that's the One Record standard, that's what that's all about, and we'll look at that a little bit later. Let's start with the IoT side. You have all come, many of you have come by air. And the way that airports work, as you know, is you go in, you check in, you drop your bag if necessary, you go through security, you may have to do immigration as well. And then you find yourself in an airport, you walk around, you look at the sign, you see what the gate is. And as you're going through, that might change. It doesn't matter. You can observe all of these things. Now, replace this woman in this picture here by a box. When you drop a box at an airport warehouse, it's going to stay there for eternity. Nothing will happen to it unless somebody picks it up. And that is a big difference between passenger and cargo transport at an airport. And this is something we think should change. That box should be able to say, hey, I'm this box, I go here. Perhaps it would move itself as well. And this is where IoT comes in. So, what is IoT in this respect? We're looking specifically at the real-time aspects and the local aspects of this cargo. What is in that box? Who does it belong to? As I said, where does it come from? What other information will be like from that? Its environment, perhaps. And so we did lots of surveys, in particular with shippers, who for us are the ultimate customers. What do they want? Shippers, the number one thing they would love to hear, love to get in international transport is visibility. Where are my goods? Whenever you go to a shipper presentation and you talk about air transport, or most modes of transport in fact, they say what happens is that when you put a box into the supply chain, into the transport chain, As soon as you do that, it disappears into a black hole. And at some point it comes out. But they have no idea when, how, or sometimes even where. So visibility is the first requirement. Transparency as well. Understanding what's going on with that thing specifically. Not just knowing where it is, but what's the state? Where are the issues? They would also like to have interactivity. We often think of Internet of Things when it comes to cargo is understanding where it is, what's the temperature, what's the humidity, has the box been tampered with or not. That's good, but you might want to interact with it as well. What if your flower shipment, for example, is maturing too fast while it's in transport? It would be nice if we could turn the temperature down a little bit or change the humidity. So that side of it, the interactivity with cargo, is something that we'll see coming. And then the last one is connectivity, the ability to connect with the cargo directly. So the way we call it is making cargo talk. To be able to locate it. One of my colleagues will tell you that you don't need to locate it if it arrives on time all the time, which is another thing we're working on. The idea that you need to know where it is if you think about it, is a strange idea. All you need to know is that it should be there when you expect it to be there. And the fact that we want to track cargo is only because we don't trust it. So one day, hopefully, we won't need to track things because the delivery will be guaranteed and correct. And notifications and alert. This is very important for certain types of cargo, like pharmaceuticals. Is you want to know if temperature ranges go out of range, for example. Because if it does, then perhaps you're going to restart taking mitigating actions and ship a new shipment before it has arrived, because you know it's already spoiled. So alerts like that are very important. And then, as I said earlier on, the interaction and the responsiveness of the cargo itself. That is one side of the equation. That is the actual cargo itself and understanding in an intelligent way what's going on with that. The second part is IOL, Internet Logistics. IOL is really not that different from the World Wide Web. And in fact, the origins of the idea of the Internet of Logistics are exactly the same. It's trying to connect things, trying to connect people and their companies with their goods. And so in the same way that we're all very used to be able to access information from any website, from our cell phones, from our browsers or whatever, without having to install a special browser or downloading another app. In fact, it's so normal, we don't even think about it anymore. But with a Chrome browser, you can go to any website. And we think that's normal. But actually, each website is representing a different data source. Okay? And IOL, Internet Logistics, is exactly the same. It's trying to come with standards in such a way that you can connect with any data source without having to do IT integration, without having to install other browsers or apps. That is what we're trying to achieve here with the One Record program. And the result will be transparency and visibility. Now, the One Record data sharing standard we are developing matches extremely well with what Frank spoke about this morning. And it's based on a number of pillars. And again, going back to the web a little bit, I was fortunate enough to work at CERN 30 years ago already, when the web was invented by Tim Berners-Lee. And the only reason why we have it today, and probably why we have seen this transformation and evolution, is because he developed standards. He did not develop a system. He developed standards so that other companies, IT providers, could implement web servers and browsers. And so we've taken the same approach here. We're developing a standard, and we're working, of course, with stakeholders to implement it. First element is that it's a network. It's a network, and the nodes are the companies that need to share data, which could be any company. Or, if companies aren't willing to do that, they could outsource that, of course, to third parties that do a good job at that. The second part of a network as well is APIs, the way that you connect to computers. Now, fortunately, again, the web standards are there. We don't have to reinvent the wheel. So we're using pretty much standard API, but we're making sure it's specified in such a way that everybody can use it. So one API standard for the Internet of Logistics. Security, extremely important. How do we know that the data that we're sharing with another party actually goes to that party. We need to make sure that we can identify the other party and decide whether or not we're willing to share data with them. Linked data is one of the coolest things about this project. We're all used to sharing documents, and all the electronic systems today are about pushing documents electronically, pushing them through messaging systems. Now, that works, but it had lots of issues to it. And in fact, if you take a stack of documents for any freight, 80% of the information is the same. It just carried on from one document to the other. And that's aside from the fact that in the process it gets copied and copied and copied with plenty of mistakes, unfortunately. Linked data is saying leave the data where it's created in the first place and just give a link to that. So that instead of sending a document, we're sending these links. And if you want the data, click on the link, retrieve the data. There's another element to that, is that there's some new technology for data. Many of us are using XML or some older EDI formats. These are very rigid. If you don't use them properly, things break down. RDF is a slightly newer technology. I say slightly because it's also 15 years old. Slightly newer technology which is becoming quite popular now because it has a much more flexible approach to how you structure data. And so that's something we massively explore and will allow us to connect with data sources from multiple areas that don't necessarily synced or they're not necessarily aligned. We think that with a standard like this, we'll see the emergence of apps. It doesn't exist today at all. If you want a nice feature on your system, you need to go to your IT provider and ask them to implement it, or change IT provider. That's not how it should be. When you buy an iPhone, it doesn't just come with the standard pack of apps. You can download any app you like. We believe that freight will go that way as well. So lots of functionality will be coming out once you have standards like this. And lastly, although I represent air, we're working with all the other modes to make sure that it works there as well, so we can start connecting the modes. And so specifically, we're doing a project under the umbrella of the EU, together with a number of EU member states, to connect all of the modes using this one record approach. We're running a number of pilots. This is not theory. So early this year, we started off independent, separate pilots that involve shippers, freight forwarders, in some cases customs as well, airlines of course, and see how this information actually works when you share data. And we've got a bunch of them, a bit like constellations. And at the end of the year, when they've all proven that this works and maybe debugged it, we'll connect them. And so you come from individual sources of data sharing to a bigger network, and you can imagine how we will grow that. But even just this tiny little step here from connecting individual islands, we'll get 210 connections in that network where there were initially perhaps only 5 or 6. The network effect is extremely strong, which I think is what's going to push the growth of this. And actually, we really, really pushed it. Just this network could have 77 million potential connections without doing any integration, as long as the parties use the standard. So this is a very powerful way of connecting across the industry. In the perfect world, in our view, you have to combine Internet of Things with Internet Logistics. They're different things. The Internet of Things will give us interactive cargo and local data that can work independently. But unless you link it to the global data, it probably doesn't mean that much, because you're not going to store it all on the box. There's too much information you might want to have. And with that, I come back to my question. What is it you want? In fact, I could ask this question to any of our stakeholders in the supply chain, not just customs, but the forwarders, the shippers, the handlers, any party, and they all come up with the same answer. They need to be all-seeing. It's not the technology that matters. It's the ability to get the information, and not just all the information, but as early as possible. Frankly, when it's created is when you want to get it. And so, with this, I will stop my little introduction here. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for that, and we're looking forward to coming back to you and hoping to summarize some of the key takeaways that you really want to drive home at the end of today. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce our next panelist. His name is Mr. Frank Callewaert. He's the Global Technology Strategist for Microsoft. He's brought with him his gadget that I'm asking you not to put on my head and to put on Patrik's if you're going to test it. His role is really about empowering EU institutions to achieve more with the intelligent edge and the intelligent cloud. So over to you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the introduction, Lisa. Thank you, Henk, for your interesting presentation. Thank you for attending the session. So I'm going to talk about IoT for customs from a technology perspective. As Microsoft, we are engaged in providing technology to build solutions. And when we look at IoT, we see that IoT is really a part of the business revolution that is going on in trade and in customs. It's one of the critical components. It's part of the wave of innovations that we see going on. IoT, edge computing, AI. I will talk about that more in my session this afternoon. But we see Internet of Things a bit everywhere. And if we relate that to trade and logistics, this goes from natural goods, from livestock, from freight, from trucks, vessels. Everything that you imagine today is and will become an IoT object. And as already mentioned by Henk, IoT objects will generate data. And it's all about the data that these things will generate. It's big, and it's not Microsoft that is saying this. It's analysts like IDC and Gartner that make huge predictions on what the impact of IoT will be on the market globally. If you look at these numbers, it's sometimes hard to imagine what it is, 180 zettabytes of data. I cannot at least capture this with my brain, how big data set that it is that they will generate as objects. Now, if we simplify IoT as a technology strategy, it's about things, and everybody knows that. It's about the data, but then the next thing, the real thing, is what do you do with the data? You want to generate insights with that. Insights using machine learning, using AI, using other types of technologies, not for the sake of getting these insights, but to take actions. Corrective actions, risk management actions, all these type of things that are related to the logistical process. If it were as simple as that, we probably would not have this talk, because there are a lot of things to do before you can use things in an Internet of Things project. Security, working offline, encryption, it has been mentioned by Henk as well, are all things that probably need some simplification before it can be applied in a big scale as projected. So when we look at this from a Microsoft perspective, we talk about edge computing, and all these devices will get more and more intelligence. That's why we call it, they are things on the edge, and they are intelligent. They can process things, they can encrypt things, they can store things. They become really powerful mini computers that sit in any device, in any freight, in any container, in any truck, and any plane, everything that you can imagine. And then you need behind a very powerful system to manage all that data. And that's the two components we see. We call that the intelligent cloud, and that can be something that is on-premise or that can be public cloud. To facilitate this, we in fact, as Microsoft, we developed our own IoT operating system, and we call that Azure Sphere. And Azure Sphere is in fact a design, a hardware design, that we have open sourced, and many hardware vendors are producing, in fact, an IoT controller based on our specifications, or in line with our specifications. So this leads to standardization. It supports protocols, again, standardization requirement, and what is very critical, it has an open source operating system that is GPL, so everybody can take it, but that operating system focuses on two things: standards, on communication protocols, security, on encryption. Encryption at rest, encryption in transit. And that is how we try to solve and to harmonize, in fact, the adoption. If you buy a car today, if it's a European brand or some other brands, they will have a chip, which is an Azure Sphere chip. You don't have to know. We see cargo companies, we see scanning companies adopting this type of logic in scanners, in IoT devices connected to containers and others. We are sitting behind this as a technology provider. And that's why we see also IoT and IoT data flowing through the whole customs process. We really believe that IoT can play a role in every step in the e-customs and e-trade experience. So, if we envisage this from a very high perspective, we can think about the logistics sector using this, and I think that has already been explained by the previous presenter partially, but also from a producer and buyer perspective, where if I'm from Belgium, I like chocolate, and it has been mentioned that if the temperature of goods is, especially for chocolate, is getting below a certain temperature or above some temperature, the chocolate is wasted. So to be able to track this as a consumer, this is also very useful. And we introduced things like multi-layer RFIDs and QR scans, temperature measuring, and of course we will combine this potentially also with blockchain technology. But the livestock is the products, are they fair trade? Is this genuine or counterfeit? This type of things, IoT and IoT type of applications will help with that. And then next to that, there's the whole physical security. Physical security on the airport, in a port, on the border, on the goods, but also for the people. Who do you authorize? Who can pick up that cargo? Do you authenticate that person? Do you do that with visual recognition, facial recognition? Do you use fingerprints for that? All these security technologies, physical security technologies, are part of our IoT. You see camera surveillance. In a port, in a border, you want to do pattern detection. You will potentially want to do card plate detection, reading the information that is on the containers, on the freight automatically using technology. So we see IoT in the whole chain. And let me give you a couple of very practical examples. I have many more, but I had to make the selection for this presentation. And if my slides would advance. Okay, yeah, that's one too much. This is an example here on wood tracking. We know that there's a lot of problems with the forests and the incorrect, let's say, harvesting of forests. So this is an example where IoT objects are, from the harvesting until the production, are following, in fact, the wood. Another example, and I have a problem with my slides here, they don't advance. So I'll press the button again, with the risk to skip 3 or 4 slides now. So if somebody from the back can, okay, thank you. Fleet management. If we match fleet management, my chocolate example is one of them, but also when will your goods arrive? Predictive arrival. If you can track, if you know the position of a plane, if you know the position of a vessel, if you know the position of a truck, you map that with weather conditions, you map that with traffic conditions. You can predict arrival, you can organize your arrival at port, put the trucks at parking lots far away from the port if you know it's very busy. Is it genuine or is it counterfeit? Has it been tampered with? This is a solution that we developed here together with 3M, where 3M is providing the multi-layer RFID QR type of solutions. So if you have tampered with the box, you can use the vision technology to scan that QR code and to see that things have been tampered with. And every step in this process can be logged into a blockchain. I will talk a bit more about blockchain in my presentation this afternoon. But as said in the beginning of my presentation, the idea of IoT is to generate data. Generate data that becomes useful in the logistical e-commerce type of situation for customs and trade. And Henk already mentioned it, it's everywhere. And we see it literally everywhere. And so to collect that data, to process that data, we will need to store that data and apply machine learning on that. Now, what is machine learning? Very simplified. It's finding patterns in data. And it's doing things based on these patterns, giving it a risk score, predicting when it will arrive, giving the condition of transport and refuse the goods. This is all type of things that you can do with machine learning. So you collect the data and you train the system to recognize the things you want to recognize. Objects, people, documents, certificates of origin, bills of ladings, invoices, insurance documents, and you want to all be able to do that digitally. So you have to have the possibility as part of that chain, as a customs organization, to train what do you want to see. Do you want to find weapons? Do you want to find explosives? Do you want to find drugs? Here on the slide you see an example of a fridge. I want to see in the fridge that there are tomatoes, that there are paprikas. I train the model with my knowledge. And then I deploy the model on IoT things. And IoT things, we have seen, that can be everything. That can be that Azure Sphere, but that can be a camera like this one, on which you can deploy a Docker container with your trained algorithms to detect what is happening in your site. If you take this a bit further, you can also put this through a scanner, and the scanner can detect if things are, for example, counterfeit, if things are broken, much faster and much more accurate than a human being can do. So this is all about a vision API and using the vision. So let me step back one position here. If I want to now use IoT to do a physical inspection, and I have all that information that is collected, and I know what the layout of my port is, I know where the position of the trucks should be, I know where the containers should be, and I'm now sent to the site to do a physical inspection. Well, I can use an IoT object like this one, which is a kind of very smart computer that allows me to see two worlds, the real world and the world that is connected to my backend system. Yeah? So if I put on this device, I will have, in fact, a solution that is based on what we call mixed reality. And with the mixed reality, I see you as an audience, and I can start to project things that are supposed to be there. And the intelligence, because this is a computer, this can be connected to Wi-Fi, this can be connected to 4G, this can have my model deployed locally, so it can work offline, will help me to see the difference, for example, between what is supposed to be there at the site versus what is there. I can have people in the back office that have a video conference with me and that point me to a certain area and say, this is the area that, and they draw a circle, and I see that circle, that is the point that you have to inspect. Yeah. And this might look very futuristic for you, but it's not at all. It's not at all, because we have, for example, Smith's detection here. They are present. They have built into their scanners the logic to detect things, as I described. Remember my example of the fridge. They are not looking for tomatoes per se, they are looking for very specific things on X-ray images. So they use a vision API that can detect things that they have trained their system to detect. They have built in this device in a helmet. If you go in a port for a physical inspection, if you go in a warehouse, you are probably supposed to wear a helmet. If you build in a device like this in a helmet and you can connect it to your back-end control room, it's very powerful to do physical inspections without having even the knowledge per se of what you should inspect, how you should inspect it, because you are supported by your back-office people connected to you, seeing what you see, and overlaying the real world with the virtual world. That's why we call it mixed reality. Based on what they see, based on what the scanning results is, these type of solutions will give a risk score, and based on the risk score, it's then up to you to decide with your risk management framework, what is the course of action that you will take. Will you move this aside? Will you take this for an additional inspection? So we see a combination of reading tags, reading smart seals, positions of containers, positions of goods, arrivals of things, all brought together in a one unified solution that we believe is helpful for customs and trade. So we call that the intelligent edge, and the intelligent edge, as you understood, is something that is very broad and that can be deployed on devices like this, on phones, on simple cameras, up to data centers, and it's all integrated from a solutions perspective, driven 100% by data collection and analytics, real-time analytics on the data that these devices connect. So again, okay, and I think I missed my last slide, but that was my conclusion slide that I already gave to you. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And I'm sure people have had a chance over the next couple of days to play around with that, or they can see you afterwards at your booth. I'd now like to welcome Benedict Nell. She is from the Bureau of International des Containers, and she is also the representative to the World Customs Organization. Her main role is about fostering customs business partnerships for trade facilitation. So please come and take the podium.
Thank you, Lisa. Good morning, everyone. Let me introduce myself a little bit. So I'm working for the BIC. So maybe like some of you will wonder like what on earth someone dealing with disposable ballpoint pen is doing about smart containers. Okay, so it's not the BIC like from the pen, let's be clear. It's the Bureau International of Containers that I'm representing, and we are actually like representing like a group of 2,500 members using containers, like from shippers, carriers, IT providers, and container lessors, and etc. So in trying like to promote safe, secure, and sustainable containerized transportation. And this is why I'm here like to talk about the smart containers, and also basically to share with you some of the concerns and some of the interests of the BIC membership regarding this old idea, but actually like with some new developments that we've had seen like in the last few years, as my colleague presented to you like just before. So I'm going to focus a little bit more on the shipping aspects of the use of container, like, and here like to focus a little bit on what has been done like for smart containers, and basically how it has changed and what could be the challenges and opportunities linked to these these intelligent boxes. So regarding the shipping, the container shipping industry, like we have been like been through three main phases in the last 25 years of huge consolidation, and huge consolidation basically like driven by resource optimization and trying like to get like higher competitiveness, and through definitely like major investment of merge, but also trying like to optimize costs, and also thanks to the, let's say a little bit like the responsibility of the industry, gathering like 90% of the non-bulk trade of goods. There is also a responsibility of environmental efficiency. And you all, we've been discussing about a lot of things going on through this industry, through blockchains and other things, but I will not talk about any of the technologies. I'm not at all like at the level of expertise that my colleagues are bringing, but more about like what's happening and what could be maybe done like between customs and the industry, like to better use the benefits of this technology, and maybe like to get to the next stage. So we've been like discussing about all those major digital trends that are like happening now, like for the container shipping, like you can see here like what it is all about. Like we're having platforms which are important, like analytics, IoT, artificial intelligence, autonomous vessels, blockchain, cybersecurity. Everything is integrated. Like it's necessary, like here, like to think as an industry into an integrated solutions, because one thing goes with the other. Like we've been seeing, like before, like the IoT is capturing and communicating data, but if you do not have the analytics to actually analyze and assess like this data, this is totally useless. And here, like in the shipping industry, it's you have seen as well like that we're having several blockchain or distributed ledger technology applied to some of the supply chain phases, and this is definitely thanks to the fact that the IoT are bringing data and capturing that. And this is where also we can see that these integrated solutions have been a long time ago identified as the concept of data pipeline. And here the data pipeline that the container industry is understanding is definitely a pipeline which enable the capture of the right data at the right time by the right entity. So it's not like a bulimic, huge pipe of data that everyone should swallow. It's really about making sure that you're having granular information that you need. Okay, it's not in the right order, those slides, but it's going to be okay. So here, these are the benefits of the smart containers. You have all those different, okay, let's go back. All those different elements, I hope that you can read that. It's all the data obtained by smart containers are the basis, basically, of value-added services that can be offered to the relevant players of the shipping world. You can promote through the smart container solution. You can provide benefits for transport operators because they can control their operation and resources to know where is the container, where, at which spot, and also to learn, because an IoT is not only one container. Usually, you are equipping your fleet or part of your fleet of container with IoTs, and then you can, or part of your supply chain, and then you can actually draw conclusions what was, where were the stumbling blocks, what were the impediments in my supply chain, and to draw from this data some important elements for your decision-making process. But it's also useful for logistics service provider, handling operators, freight forwarders, brokers, to know what is the status of the consignments, what is the integrity of the cargo, and is it still in good condition, as we've seen, the sensors are quite wide, and it's possible to really focus on the quality of the cargo in itself. But also for the BCO, the consigners and the consignees, it's possible to be more instead of being a passive player of your supply chain, you're still owning the goods actually, but nowadays in a blind supply chain, the BCO are actually obliged to be totally passive. They are stuffing the container, and until the moment where the consignee is opening the container, no, they do not know, those owning the merchandise do not know. So it's going to be possible to take more an active role in actually mitigating the hazard linked to your own specific goods, and to assess the supply chain performance, what can be made better, and maybe to redirect totally your supply chain, and trying to find new partnership, and of course in optimizing as well your inventory management. If some part of your cargo is actually ruined by a rise of temperature, during the sending avocados from Central America to Europe, you will be able to directly in advance, before the cargo of avocados arriving to Europe, to take the right decision, to send maybe a new batch, and that way making sure that you are having this active role. It's of course for the perishable goods is something specific, but you can imagine that for more complex supply chain, how this decision-making assets can play a role in cutting costs. It's also important to understand the benefits, not only for cutting costs, making sure that you're having the resource optimization, but also some of you have said before about the safety. It's not only about money, it's also about the safety of people. I don't know if some of you remember that few very tragic story for the last few months actually, of vessels crew who, I don't know, some boats who had to carry some container of dangerous goods, the container caught in fire, and then the whole, basically like the whole boat get damaged, and more than I think 12 crew of the vessel died, trying like to extinguish like this fire. So it's also a way, like through the smart containers, to identify, like having the right sensors, like to get some alerts. Instead of the vessel crew like going around like manually checking the temperature of the container, receiving directly like the alert of something is going wrong, like and it can actually save life. It's also the case like for customs. You can have access directly like to the fact that when you are about to maybe to open a container, like that you will know that there are like dangerous goods or chemicals inside, or that the goods have been fumigated before, and that you will be able like to take the right decisions into that. It's also bringing, the smart containers are also bringing benefits like for the container owners, or no, of course, like to know where are those containers, like we were talking about earlier this morning, the fact that there are a lot of unnecessary movement of empty containers, because it's extremely difficult nowadays without the smart boxes to know how to optimize like the fleet of a container, like for any type of container owner or lessors. It's also bringing benefits, for example, for depot operators. Now, like you having in the container depots, like you having actually people running cars, like going through all those huge depots and checking manually, like what are the containers who are in the depot, and counting, identifying like the different containers where are in the depots. Like it's possible now to do that remotely, and indeed, like bringing a lot of environmental actually benefits from that. It's possible for the terminal operator to know what is the estimated time arrival of the containers, and then like being able like to organize their own intermodal operation in a seamless manner. It's a huge as well economic benefits. For the port authority, like we've seen like through Rotterdam and Antwerp, like examples earlier, like it's really important to assess the traffic flow, and then you can definitely like take better decisions, like in terms of the investments that you will be able like to take, depending of the different location of your port, and of environmental optimization as well. And of course, for cross-border regulatory authorities as well. It's a way as well like to have access to potentially like data about tampering of container, about controlling some transit, identifying if there are like any type of deviation on route like for transit, and etc. So it's huge, but it's not only like typically like at the logistics and the operation level. It's also for bank and insurance. It's bringing definitely like benefits for bank and insurance institutions, and it's if you're having like access to this type of data, it's possible like to facilitate the claims resolution, to make it easier like to verify the trip compliance, then to process faster like to payment and extra. So this is huge. The benefits are huge, and I'm sure that some of you are having like many more like examples of what could be the benefits. And this is why like the whole shipping industry is jumping in, like, and you're having now like a huge campaigns worldwide, like of equipping the old metal box with smart devices, and to make sure that they are like leveraging like all those benefits for the shipping lines, but also for all the customers throughout the supply chain. Small estimation, like for in the last 5 years, like it has been really a skyrocketing effort from the within the container fleets, like to equip the containers. Like we are estimating more or less like 25 million of containers around the world, and for the last 3 years, like we have seen that approximately 5% of these 25 million have been newly equipped by smart devices. And this is like every week now you are receiving like news about Hapag-Lloyd last week ordering a new bulk of 70,000 new smart devices to be put on their, for example, on their containers. So this is there. This is not the future. This is there, and this is necessary, like, to ensure that they are, like, as well, that we are enabling this process. So, unfortunately, despite all the benefits for everyone, for all the supply chain stakeholders, like, we can see that there are still some challenges, and this is not yet possible, like, to fully take the full benefits of those smart containers and the smart devices. IoTs put on containers. There are two elements that are currently presenting like some impediments, like to the wider use of this beautiful technology that Frank has presented to within like our own line of business. The first one is actually some operational impediments linked to the logistics. So let's go. So this is not what I wanted to. Yeah. Let's go through the having an idea a little bit in a simple way. Like when you want to equip your fleet with smart devices and to make them into smart containers, usually, like, you're having different type of technologies, and a lot of among you are IT providers, you are service providers doing that. So you're having different way of doing that. Like it can be built in. Like some containers are built in a way like to have all those sensors and all those tracking possibilities like built in. But also you're having a lot of service providers and who are actually enabling like to fix on the container like those elements, and they are like usually what we're calling like semi-permanently fixed on the container, and they're able like to make the container a smart container. To do that, you need to install those boxes on your container. But what's happening, what we've seen is that this is what is, it's kind of a headache for a lot of the container owners or lessors. When they want to install those smart devices, they're actually having like some issues, some logistics issues, and as well some customs issues as well, because a lot of countries, when they are seeing those consignment of bulk smart devices, what they want to do, they want, oh yeah, let's collect revenue, let's put some customs duties. And unfortunately, like those smart devices are not there to stay in the country because they will be affixed on the container and sent with the container. So the WCO has some very clear tools, like to say that when it's an accessory or an equipment to a container, like it needs to be granted a temporary admission and with customs duties exemptions. This is clear, the legal framework is very clear from the WCO, but unfortunately this is not fully applied by the customs community. And here, like, I would be extremely happy, like, to discuss with some of you, both from the IT provider and service providers point of view, to continue, like, to gather, like, from the big side, we are gathering a lot of experience from your side, like, to make sure that we are conveying your concerns to the WCO and to the customs community. And for those of you who are representative of customs administration, we would love as well, like, to receive your side of the story. And because, again, like, we are all agree here that this is happening, but unfortunately, if the customs treatment or the logistics is not enabled, like what we are doing. We are delaying and we are making this installation of smart devices on container more costly. When now, like, the technology is, the cost of the technology in itself is really, like, getting fairly low, like when we are seeing, like, 2 years ago, like the prices were not the same. But it would be such a pity, like, not to make sure that we are finding a common ground to ensure that there is a little bit more predictability for the user of smart containers in order to install. And also some of you, like some of you as service providers, you are also having like not permanently a fixed solution and IoTs, but you also like, especially for example for the rail thing, at the end of the once the container has arrived, you are taking the device and you are shipping it back to your first port of entry, and this return logistics is bringing as well a lot of obstacle and a lot of costs. So it would be nice like to continue to work together like what we are doing with the WCO to ensure that there is less costs. And as well, like it's also a matter of collective responsibility. Like we've gathered a lot of information for some of our members. For example, like one of our members like wanted like to set 50,000 devices on its container fleet. Got huge issue like at borders, like with this installation, had to delay and like to postpone totally this installation, and they have calculated what was the cost of that, of this not happening installation of smart devices on their container. And they have identified at a cost of 1 mil of lost saving, like per basically like per 1,000 containers, which is huge, and a direct cost of 50,000 kilograms of CO2 per month. Because indeed, like if the smart containers are not, if the containers are not installed with their smart devices, you continue to need manual inspection. You continue to need all those CO2 expensive processes that we've been talking before. So here that's the first problem that we have. The second one is the absence of a mechanism of interoperability. Like we've discussed about that a lot. I will not go into detail. It's when we're talking about the data pipelines, like enabling the different stakeholders to access the right data at the right time by the right entity having the right authorization to access that. This is the theory, this is great, but for sure, like we need to having data governance rules to do that. And if we are not adopting those rules, like it's a problem, like to actually interconnect like the different collaborative system. It's a matter of data quality. It's a matter of cybersecurity as well. And here, like I would like to just like to talk to you about like one big initiatives about like the global container database, where we are actually providing like the possibility for the all container users like to have a way like to know what is the container that they are in front of them, or what is the container that they have to deal with. Like from a very messy, I need to call the lessor, I need to call, and etc. Like you have the possibility now through APIs to having a clear idea about what is the tar weight of the container, what is the characteristic, is it a reefer, is it a foldable container, and etc. To know if there are like if there are any type of alerts on those container, if they have been sold, and etc. So this is a very simple way, like basically like to feed the data pipeline. But it's not enough, and here it's like where I would like to use the opportunity that is given to the BIC, like to talk here is to continue to work together, like in setting up the standards. So the business is participating to a lot of initiatives, like in terms of adopting standards. We're having more and more like ISO standards about container tracking and monitoring systems. The UNCFACT, we are participating as well, like to the work done on the smart containers with some very specific use case, identifying what type of data could be useful at when and for what type of receivers, like from the ETA update, identifying the message structure and the data element, for example, of what could be sent by the courier to the terminal, to the forwarder, and etc. And this is something that we would like, to call for any type of volunteers like to contribute to this work, because this is really important. And then we would like as well to salute the work which has been done at the WCO to try to link these business initiatives and to make it business to government dialogue. And we are very much looking forward working on the data model with the WCO and the customs community to work more on those use cases and making sure that the data elements and the message structure is identified soon. And I think here there is a feeling of urgency to reap off all the benefits of smart containers. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much. Patrik, you've been in this position before, being the lucky last and not having much time, but I know you do a very, very good job of getting your message across in short time. You're very good. I will quickly introduce you, Director of Public Policy, Asia Pacific for GS1 Global. You focus on cross-border trade processes, supply chain integrity, traceability, and food safety.
Yes. And now my slides are moving without me touching. Okay, good. So I'm from GS1. We're an international standards body. We work on smart container initiatives, and we work on basically identification of things in international supply chains. But I will not talk about containers today because that's already been covered. I'm going to talk about what's inside the containers, the products that are shipped across borders and that need to be inspected by customs, and the traders need to share data about these products with the border agencies. So I'm going to cover some of those points quickly. But first, I would like to introduce who we are. So this is who we are. This is where we feel comfortable. We are used mainly in the retail environment, in the supermarket, in the pharmacy, in the corner shop. Most of the supermarkets, pharmacies in the world would be using our identification standards that you would see in a regular product barcode, for example. So imagine that all these products have been identified in some way, and we actually also have classification for them, so they have been classified as well within our system. And then if we're going to link this to the topic of the day, IoT, so this is how we look at IoT for the future. So this is back to the refrigerator that can automatically order your milk when it's about to run out, or you can maybe tell Alexa that you want all the ingredients for a certain recipe, and then Alexa will, in some clever way, order those ingredients from some supermarket or e-commerce platform. But the foundation for doing these kind of things is to be able to identify the products and be able to identify them uniquely. So what we are working on with industry all over the world is the physical identification of products that you're very familiar with from the supermarket when they're scanning your product when you're leaving paying and leaving the supermarket. But we are also, of course, operating now in the new e-commerce environment where people are buying the food online, and of course the food needs to be, or food or pharmaceuticals or whatever it is, needs to be identified when you're buying it online as well. So we are working with industry and e-commerce platforms, retailers, to help with this, to create identities for all products that are being sold globally. So the products that use our system today, it's about 4 trillion products every year. Unique products, and there are about 5 billion transactions on a daily basis. So this is the identity of a strawberry jam, right? So you would have a brand name, you would have a product description, you would have an image in many cases, you would have a classification code, you would have the content, and you would have the target market as the kind of the foundational data that trade requires. And then behind that data we would also have, maybe for regulatory purposes or for other purposes, requirements to share things like allergens and nutrition information, etc. So this is what we do, and this is how we work with industry to enable the sharing of this kind of data. So we try to provide the trusted product information. We try to deliver supply chain efficiencies by unique identification and the standardized sharing of data about products and supply chains. And we try to develop higher quality data at a lower overall cost. So I think yesterday someone was talking about data quality in the panels, and that resonates with us as well. Data quality is it's foundational for what we do, and looking at all the different projects that are going on, if you don't have proper data and data quality into this, whatever the technology is, it's not worth much, even if it's a nice blockchain solution. So we are working with industry to achieve these goals. So why am I here then? How can this also benefit customs and border procedures and develop the digital supply chain? So I think this was kind of the main questions for this session today. So I will try to address that in about 3.5 minutes. So one of the most common control and enforcement issues are a result from lack of quality information. There's an absence of data, and you know that a delay at the border is costly for traders and adds cost to the final product. So we want to eliminate this. So we have about 2 million members globally, and many of them are trading their goods cross-border. And if we can eliminate cost from their supply chains, it will be beneficial for them. And we are trying to drive initiatives supporting our members and make their supply chains even more efficient. So industry, our members, they need certainty in their supply chain, making forecasting and planning easier. They need efficiency, lowering time delays and cost. They need simplification, they need automation, and less cumbersome procedures at the borders. On the other hand, if you look at governments, they want accuracy, they want high quality data with the cost-effective tariff verification and automatic identification of goods. They want an enhanced trade facilitation, and they want smarter customs, smarter borders, and they want a smarter work in risk prevention and regulatory compliance among traders. And then the third party that we tend to forget sometimes is all of us, the consumers. What do we want? We want actually safe, genuine products. We want to make sure that the food we're giving our children is not counterfeit, it's not contaminated, etc. So, and we trust governments and regulatory agencies to make these the proper controls when the goods are being imported or distributed for the domestic market. So we trust the governments to do this. So how does it all come together? In one, we have a few cases where we're working with customs all over the world, in North America, Asia, South America. And one of the better ways to apply this unique identification of products is to be able to automatically share product data, business to government, for a more granular data that customs can use. And the foundational part is this unique identification that I introduced you to. And to automatically be able to share this data is a way to bypass the red tape that we are addressing in this session. And we are now working with customs in a few countries with their systems, learning what products are getting green lane, red lane, what's high risk, what's low risk, based on the admission history and based on this unique identification that we are underpinning. Moving forward, we are expecting these platforms that will interact with each other throughout international supply chains, and of course customs is a stakeholder here, but we need to have structured, standardized, linked data to be able to do this. And finally, we believe that our standards can provide the accurate and complete product information that can be used both for you as a consumer when you're making a web search, for example, or as for a company for smarter analytics, as well as for customs at the border for better admission decisions and more efficient procedures at the border. So I'm done and I'm on time. Thank you.
It was brilliant. Thank you. Thank you. So we've been told to try and make sure we do finish by 1 o'clock because we're standing between you and lunch and playing catch up with some time, which is a pity because we had a really good discussion planned. But what I might do, because we still do have a couple of minutes, is just ask each of our panel members, what is it that you would like to maybe give one takeaway to all of the delegates here today on what you've mentioned? What would be the one thing that you think is the most important to get across? And we'll start with you, Henk.
Thank you.
You just need to, yeah.
Thank you very much. The one takeaway is the one I didn't mention, is that I think there's a degree of urgency in everything we've been talking about. And I think that is the case for all of the panel members. As much as these technologies like IoT create new opportunities for providing transparency, visibility, and all of the things we have discussed, I think the digitalization is happening extremely fast around us. And what I'm seeing in my environment, the airlines in particular, of course, but also the other parties in the supply chain, is that we're always playing catch up. And sometimes we take decades to catch up. But I think that we're getting to a point in the development of the digital change, the change management, if you want, is that there are other forces at play here. To the point where new standards are being set, de facto standards by very large entities, and I'm thinking in particular of e-commerce. It's a good thing, but if we don't catch up with these people, if we don't stay aligned with it, in the end we'll all carry a very high cost in trying to deal with it. So my takeaway for you will be, take whatever you've heard here and add a degree of urgency to that.
Thank you very much. And Frank?
Okay, thank you. I think from my perspective, during my presentation, I focused a lot on the data generation, and I think it has been reinforced by the other panel members here as well, that data sharing, standards on data formats, standards on protocols, new capability to do real-time sharing is critical for IoT to be successful. And I think opening up the technology means to do that. If you want a real-time airline type of information, you will have to have big capacity systems that can give you these real-time analytics. So investing in the newest technology, and I think I'm reiterating your message, to treat all that data in a standardized way is, I think, one of the key elements.
Thank you.
Despite like definitely like the need of urgency that is important, it's about as well maybe expanding like the idea of collaboration. Like we've been talking a lot about, like everything is about collaborating between the different stakeholders of the supply chain, but also it's very necessary to collaborate like between business and governments, and here like to take a little bit one step further, like in terms of innovation, like maybe reconsidering like the way we are traditionally doing like this, having this dialogue between business and government. It's about maybe here about thinking of what could be the next step of just a way of sharing data with the right credential, like with the right quality of data, with the right security linked to the data, and maybe no more like basically like duplicating things. I don't think, and I don't think customs own any data. It's business owning data, and I don't think it's necessary like to think of any type of customs generating more data sets. It's about customs accessing the right data that they need at the right moment. So maybe we should rethink a little bit about the way we are collaborating together and making sure that we are making things happen in a new way and in a more efficient way, like for the sake of the planet and for the sake of of us all, basically.
Thank you. And Patrik?
Yeah, I think I'll just reiterate what my fellow panelists have said and what previous speakers this morning have mentioned as well, that I think we need to step up the collaboration, business and government, and I think we need to look at what is the opportunity here to leverage industry-generated product data. The granularity there is just an example. We are doing a project in Asia Pacific, and I think for one of the products we are including in the pilot, it's about 250 data elements that's available, and that it's very high quality data that the exporter is sharing with the customs organization, and this is helping them a lot. And this is the kind of quality data that can be made available when you can source it from, or when it can be shared from industry databases, for example, at least in the space that GS1 is working. So I think it should be further explored how this can be leveraged in more customs organizations all over the world, how you leverage the industry-generated data. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I do apologize that we haven't had time to actually take any questions from the floor. I was given a very firm deadline to finish. But maybe what I could ask all of the panel members, if they'd be very willing to do this whilst everyone else rushes out for lunch and joins the queue of 150 people all trying to get to one spot, maybe you might stay around here just at the front if anyone has any specific questions for you, because I'm sure a lot of you probably want to go into a lot more detail, because everyone's presentation was really fantastic. It's a big topic, and it's a pretty hard one to get your head around as well, particularly when we only had an hour in the end to be able to cover this. Listening to all of everyone's presentations, I just want to summarize 3 things that I took away, and they came out in nearly every single one of your presentations. The importance of collaboration, the importance of standards, and the urgency of which those 2 things are going to need to happen. And so if I was to summarize it, I think that's what you all were trying to say. I think we need to focus on that, and standards are going to be the key area that we need to do it, and it needs to be done fairly urgently. So could you please thank our panel members? And you get to go to lunch, and they'll hang around and they'll take any questions that you might want to have. So thank you very much for all of your time.